The enemy wishes to fight, brothers! Let us indulge them!
Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Asmogan and today is going to be a bit of a different kind of commentary video. Normally they're more news style where there's like a hard-hitting like title or headline I can kind of hit on. And there's a specific like article or video or something I can address directly and kind of commentate on and fit in probably 10 minutes flat. This video, I warn all of you, is probably going to be a bit longer than 10 minutes. Might be shorter, we don't know. Because I'm not scripting this, I'm just kind of speaking from the heart. And today I kind of want to address the Women in Wargaming panel that happens at Salute, I believe. It's a wargaming event in Canada. Specifically around Warhammer, at least I believe it's specifically around Warhammer. It might be Wargaming in general, but regardless, either way, what I have to say doesn't really change depending on that. And this specific video that I'm like getting all this from is from the Midwinter Minis video. The main personality on this video being Hattie as opposed to Guy. And I want to make something clear before I get into like the rest of my thoughts or like the really detailed stuff. I want to make clear that this is not me trying to start drama. If this ends up offending or hurting feelings, I apologize that is how it was taken, but that is not the intent. My intent is to have a genuine conversation, and hopefully it can be carried over in the comments, and maybe I'll do an open mic on it soon. But I do genuinely want to address this idea. But before I get into it, again, I want to make clear that is not me trying to start drama. And to Hattie specifically in this video, I have nothing against her. I don't have anything against Midwinter Minis. In fact, Midwinter Minis is probably one of the best Warhammer channels you are going to find, especially in regards to painting. It is just the best painting tutorials, the best speed painting videos, some of the more fun kind of side videos, just kind of showcasing like some hobby energy and excitement. And honestly, Guy is probably the person to look to when you want to look for a positive source of inspiration in this hobby. And I think Hattie has also kind of carried that as she's joined the Midwinter Minis crew. I wouldn't say it's too far off to say I am a fan. I'm not like a major fan. I'm not like a fangirl. I'm sure if I saw them in public, I would geek out a little bit. They're really cool, and they brought me a lot of inspiration myself when it comes to my own painting projects and they've given me ideas for my projects. And honestly, I can't stress that enough, that this is a channel and a set of personalities behind a channel that I majorly respect. So this isn't pointed, and a lot of my criticisms and a lot of what I have to say is not pointed at them specifically. But unfortunately, this is the avenue of which I came to think about this and have the thoughts that I am going to be presenting today in today's video. They came from viewing this video from Hattie and Midwinter's Minis, and it's a lot. But real quick, I just want to play one specific segment from Hattie's video here. And you know, the whole video is not very long. I do recommend people go watch it themselves. Feel free to, but I'm just want to display real quick. So you know, Hattie gives a brief description on what the Women in Wargaming's panel is, and that's what I'm responding to, is what they themselves have defined it to be. And I just want to make it clear, it's not just because women have to be running on a panel, it's their own specified intent with the panel.
Then it was panel time. The footage we got wasn't great, so I won't put too much of it in, but the gist of the panel was to discuss what women and people of other marginalised genders experience in the hobby. On the panel with me was Louise, formerly Games Workshop with me and now Rogue Hobbies.
Yes, so that is what this panel is. It is not just women expressing their hobby enthusiasm and their hobby joy within this space. It is specifically about addressing supposed injustices and mistreatment that women and marginalized groups supposedly face in this space. And a lot of what I'm going to present and say is from my own experience. I don't have a series of statistics put in front of me. I'm sure someone has them somewhere. I'm sure someone's done like polls and studies. But from my own experience and from my own engagements in the hobby, this notion that I've seen continue to be pushed over the last couple of years I'd say it really ramped up after 2016, at least here in the West, with a lot of politicization in media and hobby spaces and things like that. This notion that minorities or women or minorities and women are somehow rebuffed when they enter spaces like wargaming or video games or other hobby spaces, when I've experienced the opposite. And women I know in the hobby space have experienced the opposite. And the only time they've experienced like sexism or marginalization or oppression or being pushed out of the space, any kind of rebuffing of them in the space, ironically has been at the hands of people supposedly pushing for more diversity in our spaces and more supposedly welcoming areas for groups of, I'm going to say it a million and one times probably in this video, but marginalization. I'm going to let Addie explain a little bit more about the panel. Again, her words, not just mine. That way you guys don't feel like I'm biasly not providing all of the context. I'm going to let her go ahead and explain a little bit herself, what the panel is about, more than I already just showed.
Now, as you can imagine with the panel called Women in Wargaming, our topic was a little more serious than the likes of the Hobby Heroes panel. We started out by talking about the different experiences that non-men experience in the hobby. The general feeling I got from all of our answers was that, on the whole, we have all had very positive experiences in what is still a very male-dominated space. Here were my thoughts on it.
99% of my experience in wargaming has been absolutely lovely and very welcoming, but I do feel with the likes of social media that unfortunately our presence has been somewhat combated in some circles. I don't know a single woman in the industry who hasn't had some sort of hate just for being a woman. We've come a long, long way, but I do feel we still have quite a long way to go in terms of full acceptance.
And I would like to say, and I'm cutting off right here because that's her having described her experience and everything. And what this girl is about to say is not to do with her experience. She's about to make like this, shall I put it, inflammatory statement, going very pointedly, going, well, why does Games Workshop have a woman in wargaming or women's focused panel? And Hattie's gonna respond, well, no, I don't believe they do. And then cheekily, like a Karen, I'm sorry, I have no other way to describe it. Like a Karen, she's gonna go and go, oh, well, isn't that a thing? And obviously, very much pointedly, trying to insinuate some sexism and discrimination on the behalf of GW, which, to be fair, GW is a shitty company, and no doubt they do that to a degree, for sure. Like all corporations, they're gonna discriminate like crazy. But the thing is there, and the thing is with the whole hobby space, in my opinion, actually, this idea of discrimination, as you heard from Hattie herself, she said like how this panel talks about what non-men have experienced in the hobby, which I have an extreme problem with, because it runs under the presumption that men are not mistreated in the space, that men don't experience discrimination in the space. There's this infanticized view that's a very common view amongst feminists and woke ideologues, that is very much this ideal that men have it so easy, men don't deal with stress or problems or issues, or if they do, though, it's somehow lesser than that of what's suffered by women. And I am saddened to see Hattie hold this opinion and hold this take, because again, I looked up to her as a painter and as a personality in the space, along with Guy on Midwinter Minis. I'm afraid I can't look up to her as much. But again, as I said at the beginning of the video, this is not me targeting Hattie with any kind of hatred. I don't hate Hattie for this view. I think it's misguided. I think it's coming from a place of the grass is always greener on the other end of the hedge. And, you know, because I'm not on that side, that means it must be good on that side. It must mean that one side is getting it better than I'm getting it, and I've dealt with some crap, and I'm now going to biasly assume I have the worst position, when I don't believe Hattie does. I don't believe any woman does in this space, and I don't think women have it worse than any man does in this space. I think, like with all spaces, there is going to absolutely be sexism, there's going to be discrimination, there's going to be racist, there's going to be bad people in the space. But as Hattie herself admitted, and as she expressed that the whole panel admitted, the vast majority of their experiences are positive. And she said right here, I believe 99% of her experience is good. Well, if 99% of your experience is good, then I have a hard truth for you to swallow, Hattie, and not just Hattie, but like everyone on this panel, or everyone who might have this infanticized view of victimhood in any kind of given space of hobbydom. You have it better than most hobbies. You have it better than most people in non-hobby spaces, with discrimination, with mistreatment, like this. You're lucky if you get 99%. And she also followed it up though with like, oh, we have a long way to go until we get full acceptance. Well, I hate to break it to you, Hattie, but I haven't reached full acceptance in the hobby space. Many men have not experienced full acceptance in the hobby space. People are always going to nitpickily look at things that you do or opinions you have or things that you do in the hobby and say, well, you're not a real hobbyist because of this. In fact, 90% of the real world discrimination that happens in at least this space, I would say, is hobby elitism. And that elitism isn't on the basis of sex or race. It's not based on those immutable characteristics, because, to be quite frank, especially in Western countries, people care less and less about those traits. And as we all know, those traits don't mean anything. Whether you're gay, straight, bi, no one cares. Whether you're a trans, woman, male, nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's unimportant. It says nothing about you whether you're these things. It might imply some political takes you certainly have, because unfortunately these things have had politics tied, completely wrapped up and tied into them. So people will absolutely make presumptions off of your politics because of these immutable characteristics. But oftentimes they're wrong anyway. Or if they do make a presumption about your politics off of these things, it's oftentimes not as important to you as they make it out to be, or impactful to these aspects of your existence as they might make it out to be. But the point is, in this space in particular, I'd say I don't think Hattie's wrong when she says 99% of the discrimination that there's a 99% enjoyment rate and positivity in the tabletop wargaming space. I think she's dead on. The problem is she and clearly the rest of the women on this panel, as well as quite a few people who are in favor of such a sexist panel, in my opinion, because I do think the panel does run on a sexist line of thinking. It's this misandrist idea that women have it so much worse than men, that the discrimination towards women is more severe than it is towards men, and that it's only on the basis of their sex as opposed to maybe how they view certain things in the hobby. Maybe they view certain things should be changed in the hobby that people don't agree with. There is this ever-growing viewpoint in the hobby space, and not just the hobby space, but it's being pushed everywhere in any kind of extracurricular or free, I guess they're all hobbies at the end of the day, all hobby spaces, where everything has to have a political leaning into it, when, in my experience, the 1% of actual sexist or racist that you find in a hobby space, you're never going to get rid of. So, again, to Hattie and the entire women of this panel, as well as supporters of this panel and this sexist panel, that full acceptance that you're seeking, you will never receive. Because men such as myself have not received it. Straight white men such as myself have not received it. People will always find something about you not to like and to try and rebuff you for being in the space for. And don't let anyone convince you that, because they're a champion of one thing, that somehow means that they're not propagating this viewpoint that full acceptance will be a thing. Because quite often, the people who say stuff like Hattie just said, who are like, oh, we should have more diversity, have more more women in the space, more trans in the space, more this, that, or the other in the space. Oftentimes, those people are the most responsible for rebuffing others that have already been in the hobby and telling them they're not welcome here anymore. The thing is, full acceptance is a fantasy. It's a delusion. It's an idiosyncrasy. If you believe it is a possibility, you are a fool. You are living a foolish mindset. I'd say naive is a generous way to describe it. I'd say if you haven't lived life at all, that's the only way you could possibly think that it's possible. It's never going to happen. People are always going to find a reason to rebuff you. And sometimes it'll be low-hanging fruit like your sex. Sometimes it'll just be in more pinpoint things related to the hobby. And in my experience in this hobby space, oftentimes people are most discriminating not against your immutable characteristics, but they're going to find, like, they're going to target things such as, do you collect the miniatures? Well, if your answer is no and you only collect the books, well, they're going to say, oh, well, you're not a real hobbyist and you're a tourist, you should get out. Have you collected all the latest books? Well, no. Well, I collect and paint the miniatures. Oh, well, you're not a real fan then. You don't care about the lore, so you're a tourist. Or what if, like, for example, I have a friend of mine named Havor, and she's a RPer. She likes to RP as a dreadnought, like on Twitter and stuff like that. As far as I know, she's only collected like 1 or 2 miniatures, and she's not read that many of the books, and she doesn't play the tabletop game. She barely engages in the hobby in the grand scheme of things. But would I consider any less of a fan? No. But there are hobby elitists who will look at her and say, "Hey, you're not a real fan. You're not a real, you're not a real hobbyist because you don't engage in these things." And I don't think that's fair. But again, she hasn't, and she has been treated sexistly, by the way. Havor that I mentioned, she has been treated in a sexist manner in this space. But ironically, it was propagated by people on the left who propagate these kind of panels that think on the same line as these panels, that have the sexist mindset that these panels have. They run under the assumption that women are eternally victims and that men are only here to propagate such attitudes and such opinions of women, and that if you don't just bow down and immediately say, yes, women have suffered so much in injustices in these spaces, and we should all change absolutely everything for the sake of these women in these hobby spaces so they don't feel marginalized ever. Ain't gonna happen, like I said. But in Havor's case, she was called a breeder by a self-admitted left-leaning pro-female space marine Twitterite. This is the same kind of person who would go to one of these panels and would wave the flag of victory and be like, look how diverse we are, look how we're championing women in this space, when in my opinion all panels like these do are victimize you further. The only thing that got you on this panel, Hattie, was not that you are a hobby hero with talent as a painter and your ability to educate people about the hobby through YouTube videos with Guy on Midwinter Minis. You're not being recognized as a personality propping up our space and our communities. You're being celebrated because you have a vagina. And they're assuming based on you having a vagina that you've had nothing but, or you've had a great series of these harrowing experiences at the hands of sexist wargamers in their sweaty ultramarine shirts, buttermilk bobs, which do exist. And they're like that 1% that you mentioned, Hattie. You're never going to get rid of that minority of people that say that. And to be quite frank, the amount of people that say it and mean it on social media, shit like that, like, like, oh, you're a woman, you're not welcome here, you get you and your titties out of here. The men that say that, I'd say about half of them are trolls. They don't really think that about women, or if they do, it's not the reason they're saying it to you. They're saying it to you because they want a rise out of you. They want you to make panels like this and cry and whine and present yourself as a victim. But that they will do that to men. They'll do that to trans people. They'll do that to anybody they can get a rise out of. What they are after isn't actually any kind of like specific discrimination. They just want to piss off as many people as possible. And the remaining like 0.5% that actually mean it and actually like are like, this space is only for men, there should be no women in this space, you're never going to get rid of them. Never. Again, it's a fantasy that you'll get rid of them. You can make them feel unwelcome for sure, but they already do, and they have for decades. I don't think I've ever seen a man walk into a tournament or a convention panel, or convention panels that are normal, by the way, not even ones like this that are politically and controversially charged. No, like normal panels, normal groups, normal tournaments, normal things in the hobby. I don't think anyone has ever welcomed them when they come in and they start like lashing out slurs at women and demeaning them and refusing to play games against them because I don't want to put down the woman. She's lesser than I am. No one's ever welcomed those people. Ever. I've never seen it. I've never seen people pat them on the back and cheer them on and champion them at these places. No. As it is, I've never really seen ire. And I've been to numerous conventions. I've been to numerous tournaments and hobby shops. I've never once seen these people in person because they don't really come out. Like, people who hold these kinds of archaic opinions and these really internal, like these true misogyny and true sexism, they are people who are, quite frankly, in the most pitiable position to be in. They're people who, you know, they're probably the real world example of an actual incel. They live on their own, probably in their parents' basement. They don't. They're men who they're men, oftentimes men, admittedly, but there's plenty of women, I think, who are in similar positions that are, you know, they're just full of hate because they've had no social practice with women. They probably have never held a relationship very well. And outside of just like sex and relationships, they probably also had a lot of bad influences around them. People who have had hateful and bigoted opinions that are around them that they just propagate because that's all they've come to be able to do. And some of them probably know what they say is wrong on a logical standpoint, but they continue to propagate it anyway because at least this way they get attention. But again, the people that you're making a whole panel complaining about and saying we should fight against and we should rally the banners and push back against, these men, these boys, they're less than 1% of the population who play this game. Everybody else doesn't care. They don't care you have a vagina or a penis. They don't care you have tits or you have man boobs. They don't care if you have a beard or nothing here. They don't care if you have a receding hairline or really long dreads. They don't care about your skin color. They don't. No. Again, 99% of the overall discrimination you will encounter in the hobby space, outside of left-leaning people trying to say you're a sexist just because you don't want female Space Marines, and calling you a breeder if you're a woman who holds the opinion that there shouldn't be female Space Marines. Again, I'll never get over that. That's an actual piece of sexism I've experienced, and it's one of the grossest shit I've ever seen. But that was on social media. I've never seen that in person either. But yeah, most of the discrimination that occurs in this space, as I said before, is hobby elitism. It's like, oh, you're not allowed to paint your Marine like that. Hey, you're not allowed to homebrew this specific chapter. Hey, you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to draw that. You're not allowed to, and you're not allowed to touch your. You're not allowed to paint your minis until you've scraped off all the mold lines because I say so, and it's what you're required to do. You have to drill the gun barrels. If you don't drill the gun barrels, you're not a real fan. You're not a real hobbyist. Or if you're lesser than that, I'm superior to you arbitrarily because I do these things. You know, hobby elitism is the type of discrimination that you will encounter the most, and even then, it's done to everybody. Like, it's done if you're male, it's done if you're a woman, it's done to everybody. And I think panels like this are lies, quite frankly. I'm not saying that the people on it are saying lies explicitly or they're inventing things from the ground up. I'm sure they have had bad experiences with that tiny percent of people that have tried to DM them on Instagram and tried to, you know, make a big deal of something. I'm sure that is real, but the problem is you're both convincing yourself, and I'm horrified at the idea, but other people around you are also trying to convince you that there's this greater wave of misogyny and sexism and discrimination and racism and anti-trans and whatever else kind of notions, when, again, just that's not the truth. The panel is under that assumption that that is like a case, that there's this major issue that needs to be resolved, when it's not a big deal. I'm not saying that when it happens, like when an individual does it, it is something that should be addressed, and, you know, they should be called an asshole and say like, hey, fuck off. But everyone would say that already. Like, nobody has this mentality that, like, if a guy on like Reddit says that Hattie, for example, is nothing but I don't even know. Yeah, I can't even come up with a sexist insult. I don't know, maybe if they said something like Hattie should be getting Guy sandwiches for his videos, and we only want to see Guy on the videos, right? If he said something like that, you can bet your butt that everybody would be jumping on his ass. Short of 4chaners who are getting trolls, who only want to get a rise out of people. They're not actually, they don't really actually care about like the women aspect of it. It's just, did I piss her off? Good, I succeeded. Or did I piss him off? Good, I succeeded. That's all they care about. I'm happy that Hattie got to go to a convention, and I guess I'm supposedly happy that she got to be on a panel, but to be honest, I feel really bad for her getting on a panel because of her vagina, and not because of what I do think she deserves to be. I think, this might sound a bit bold to me, but I think Hattie deserves to be on Hobby Heroes. Because she is a talented painter. She's a talented creator. That's what I would like to see Hattie celebrated for. Instead, I have the horror of watching her be celebrated and encouraged to be a victim. And honestly, I think this puts down Hattie. It puts down every woman on that panel, because they're not being looked at as these individual women in the space that should, be celebrated for their talent as hobbyists or as their enthusiasm for the hobby. They're not being celebrated for these things. And in my opinion, doing that, if they did a women's panel where it was just about celebrating these women in the space, I would have an issue that they have that and not a male equivalent, but I would still be more inclined to leave a like on something like this and be positive, at least partially positive about it, because at the very least they're being celebrated for not just because of their women, but they're women who have done something in the hobby. They've cosplayed, they've made their own minis, they've, in Hattie's case, made tutorial videos and guided people to the space. It's being celebrated for being talented, and I think Hobby Heroes is for that, and I think Hattie deserves a spot for sure. But it's just, I think this panel demeans every woman on it. I think it's demeaning towards men in the space by telling them you men are the problem and need to call each other out because this is such a major issue, when in the very same breath, again, Hattie said, her and the entire panel admitted that the vast majority of their experience is positive, but somehow at the same time we have a long way to go to get full acceptance. Well, you'll never get it. I don't get it, no male gets it, why should you get it? Now, I think everyone should, but that's a fantasy. It's an ideology. Sorry, not ideology. It's a idealistic viewpoint. But just that. It's a naive dream to have this idea that you'll be fully accepted anywhere. And at the very beginning of the video, Hattie said that she, felt she didn't fully deserve to be on the. If you ask me, like, they weren't asking for much criteria. Are you willing to propagate yourself as a victim on a panel and you have a vagina? Well, there you go. That's all the criteria you had to be on for the women's and wargaming panel. Whereas Hobby Heroes is actually celebrating you for having done something. It's a positivity thing. It's just, I don't know, like, I don't get how Hattie could be positive about that, because I have autism. I have Asperger's. I can't imagine, like, if I was invited to be on a panel at a wargaming event and I wasn't being celebrated because I'm a content creator for the space, or because, I brought people in through lore videos, or my painting has inspired people to do well and I'm a good painter. They weren't celebrating me for things that actually matter to the hobby space and put me up as an actual champion of our space and as a positive angle. But no, they want me to come in and talk about my discrimination as an autistic person. I'm being dragged in because the criteria I filled to get into it was I had autism. I didn't actually do anything to deserve to be there. I'm a charity case. And even then, it's not really charity. They want me to bitch and moan so they can push a narrative. I don't know. I find it disgusting. I quite frankly find this whole thing disgusting and abhorrent. And honestly, like, that whole Karen thing of, oh, well, maybe, GW should have a woman in wargaming. I don't know. I don't think they should become as sexist as Salute is. I want us as a hobby space to be realistic and be celebratory and welcoming towards everybody, but be so as long as they actually want to engage in the space as it is. And should we push up back against genuine sexism, genuine racism? Yeah, of course. If someone is being genuinely these things, yeah. But the thing is, we already do that. It still happens. But it's still there. Yeah, it's always going to be there. It's never not going to be. So if you ask me, space is about as welcoming as you could possibly get. And the only elements in it that are unwelcoming are, quite frankly, political ideologues that push panels like this. Gatekeep, my friends. Gatekeep the hell out of people uninterested. Don't gatekeep women. Don't gatekeep black people or Mexicans or whatever hell. Don't gatekeep people off of immutable characteristics that mean nothing. Your sex means nothing. Your gender identity means nothing. Your sexual orientation means nothing. Your skin color means nothing. These are things that do not matter. They are unimportant, and if you value them, you're a moron. What matters is someone's heart. Their enthusiasm for the hobby. Whether they actually want to engage in it. That's what matters. That's what should be celebrated. And when people are talented and have an ability and are able to push the hobby and the community in positive ways, and actual positive ways, not through diversity, but through just their own talent and making the hobby look inviting and fun and not mired down by controversy and politics and social, whatever you want to call this, anarchism. Just be fun. That's what we should be pushing, not this. Anyway, that's it for me, guys. I just want to address this. And again, one last time, I'm not targeting Hattie or the women on this panel. I think they probably did share some genuinely genuine stories anyway, of when they experienced something bad in the space. And I don't think they were lying, but I think that them intentionally or otherwise were propping up their negative experiences as to be this bigger thing than it is, and with this grander scope that's happening, and there's this tidal wave of discrimination that still exists in the space, when in my opinion it never existed in the space. And this panel, as Hattie said herself, it's what supposedly non-women and non-male, it's what non-men experience, and from the marginalization line, apparently non-straight white men experience. So it's just, again, if you want me to summarize it, it's left-leaning ideology further discriminating in the space where, ironically, they're claiming the discrimination already is, when in my opinion they're bringing it. Panels like this bring discrimination, and it's propagating this idea that women are victims and men are perpetrators, and that's it, and that men don't suffer, men don't deal with problems, and it's frustrating. But that's it from me. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I'm pretty firm on my perspective. I think panels like these are harmful to the space. I think that Hattie deserves to be on Hobby Heroes. She doesn't deserve to be brought down to this shitty level and only celebrated for her vagina. I think that's kind of gross, and I'd like to see better. That's it for me, guys. Bye.